gentlemen.
Good morning.
My name is Mumbiro Ronika. I'm the deputy chief members of the Women's Coalition. Is it everyone okay? Okay, thank you. We also have groups from the academia that are here. Any of our friends, the development partners, the economy of the country affects everybody, men, women, young, children. So it is important for us to be gathering here and to be deliberating on issues that are affecting us. But also of importance is that as women, we have a unique way in which we are affected by all these things that are happening around us. And it will be of interest for us to gather and bring out those issues together so that we know how we can then push our issues forward to the necessary people. One of the things that we also want to be doing after this dialogue is to be able to influence what is happening within the issue of our economy, around issues of budgeting, around even the policies themselves, and also trying to influence even through the structures like the governor and all. So the reason why we are here then means that your presence here would then be able to feed in the information that we want to take up the issues that we want to bring on board to the various necessary people. So thank you very much for being here, and you are all welcome to be at this function. To start our session, I will ask Audrey to facilitate our first part of the session. Audrey, are you here? Thank you very much.
But just to say, Audrey is leading an institution called the Women's Space, and we are about documentation. A lot of our milestones are lost because we do not document. We are about telling stories, whether they are stories of success or stories of the challenges we meet. We are about publishing. We want to publish the stories that you have. We are also about communications. If you want to improve your internal, external communications, we are also about research, among other things. So here we are dialoguing. What are we dialoguing about? We are dialoguing about unmasking the current Zimbabwe economy, and we are anticipating that we can hear the different viewpoints. Among some of us, there are those that say, "Zvirikufai." There are others who are saying, "Akomana, hafu kutakura kwedongi." There are others who are even struggling to say, where do I get the 5 rand to get onto the combi? Then there are others who actually have the US dollar, the greenback, in God I trust, and they are able to buy ice cream and all the other frivolous things. As women, we are saying, we are the center and the pinnacle of all these happenings. Now we want to unmask this. We want to be able to hold each other's hand so that we can lift each other up and we can raise each other up. So to begin this session, we are going to have 2 amazing panelists who are going to get us started. I would love for us, as we are listening to their presentations, to be asking the so what questions, the how questions, the why questions, because therefore what? And then we can begin dialoguing. Anditi. Okay, so to begin this dialogue, I'm going to invite a development economist who has worked for around 40 years in Africa. I'm told the African story is pretty much the same. From Egypt, from Cape to Cairo, I don't know how true it is. He has worked across Africa, in Africa, within Africa. And in this period, he has worked for the UNDP, with UN CTAD, USAID, DFID, and so many other international agencies. He has advised governments. Whether the governments have taken on the advice or not is something else, but he has advised them. And these are the governments of Zimbabwe, Malawi, and South Sudan. He holds several academic qualifications and is the author of many academic papers. We want, even as we are listening to him, to say, from all your academia, how do we translate this to unmasking this dialogue? He was senior visiting lecturer in the Department of Economics at our own University of Zimbabwe, and he also in that time worked as advisor in the Ministry of Finance. We're here about money issues, and it. So he's currently the national coach of Ease of Doing Business program. How many of us want to know how easy it is to do business? And he's doing this under the office of the President and Cabinet. So many of us know kuti kunenge kuri hazy anditi, but we want that unmasked. And his program is particularly intended at improving the enabling environment for us as women in agriculture, in manufacturing, and in the mining sectors. I'm sure all the other sectors that have not been articulated, he can take care of. Please, let's put our hands together for our first panelist, and his name is Ashok Chakravarti.
You invited me to come. Thank you very much for inviting me. And to all of you, I'm happy to be here. I've never been the sole speaker, male speaker in a female gathering, so I'm a little bit intimidated. So just be patient. But I'm used to lecturing since I used to teach at the University of Zimbabwe. So I'll treat all of you, if you don't mind, since I'm a Sekuru with white hair, as my students. Right, so I'm not going to speak for very long. I prefer to receive questions for you to ask if you want to understand something, and I'm very happy to give you answers. I think the facilitator has given me a very grand title. So I am indeed doing some consultancy work and advisory work with the Office of the President. And things have changed a lot. The Office of the President and Cabinet is trying to now lead a process of opening up a dialogue which goes beyond government. So I sit on many committees in which the stakeholders are all invited. They are the government ministries and departments, of course, but we do have people from business associations, federations, women's associations, even individual businesses sometimes, CSOs and NGOs. And we are trying to encourage these voices to come on board. So you must not feel, you must not think that you want to be on the outside. You now have to come on the inside. Because if you want to influence something, we have to sit around the table and have a dialogue. Whereas if you stand outside the door with your slogans or with your issues, that is important, that is voice, but it does not have the same impact. So please, I encourage you all, and I encourage the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe and PACT, of course, and other organizations to try and come on the table as much as possible and dialogue with the government. They are there to listen, and if they don't listen, well, you have to be a little bit more forceful then. So I think that's my one point of encouragement. Today I just want to speak a little bit about how we have gotten to where we are today. And my colleague Naomi from Ledris will give you a much broader presentation of the state of the economy. So I think many of us are concerned with what happened last week. And there was fear all over the country about the situation and the condition. And as an economist, I was even invited by the management and board of CBZ, which is the largest bank in Zimbabwe. Even they were fearful, and I had to calm them down. So I think that you need to understand how we have come here, where we are today, and what are the prospects going forward. And please, I'm an economist, so don't ask me political questions. I can't give you an answer. That you have to ask your colleagues in the MDC or Zanu-PF or whoever. But it's for me to give you the facts, for you to understand, and then use it as best you can. So the first point that I want to make is that I won't go back to hyperinflation, but the main cause of hyperinflation, let's be extremely clear, There is no doubt about it, and there is no debate about it, and we cannot debate about it at all. The main cause of hyperinflation was the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, under the governor then, printing too much money. It's as simple as that. You print money, you get inflation. This is the experience of every single country in the world over the last 200 years. So it's not, I'm not speaking, it's economics which is speaking to you. So let's not be confused about that. If you print money, you will get inflation. And the more money you print, the more inflation you will get. So the Reserve Bank at that time was indisciplined. You will hear Dr. John Mangudia saying that people are being indisciplined. Well, I am saying at that time the Reserve Bank was indisciplined. And because of that lack of indiscipline, the country suffered. Anyhow, so that's an old story, and hopefully the government and everyone else and policymakers have learned their lesson, that we will not go into that direction again. But what I'm trying to tell you is that you also have to be vigilant. You have to understand the causes. If there's too much printing of bond notes, new Zim dollars, new currency, whatever it is, you will get inflation. So you have to be vigilant, and you have to understand this issue, that if things are going wrong in the financial sector, or the Ministry of Finance or the Reserve Bank is going in the wrong direction, then you have to speak up through your forums. That's the only way that your voice can count, okay? So we are finished with hyperinflation. The second point I want to make is that dollarization that came was not a decision of the government of Zimbabwe. It was your decision. It was a decision that was made by the market, or what we call the people of Zimbabwe. In economics, we call it the market. The market rejected the Zimbabwe dollar because it was worthless. And it adopted multi-currencies, the rand and the US dollar. So it was actually adopted in early 2009 by the people of Zimbabwe, not by the government. It was made official in September 2009 by the Ministry of Finance through their budget. So the government came second and the people came first. So understand the power of the market, the power that you have. You should understand that. So dollarization, I just want to tell you a little bit about it, and then we'll come to what's happening today. Dollarization is not a long-term solution to the problems of any country in the world. There is no country in the world which has had dollarization for a long period of time to solve its economic problems. It doesn't work, and I'll explain to you why. Now, we had no choice. The Zimbabwe dollar was useless, and so we adopted the dollar and the rand. But if you look at, it's basic. A lot of you are business people. Most things in an economic market work on the basis of supply and demand. So let's look at dollarization. Dollarization means US dollars. For dollarization to succeed, you have to have a supply of US dollars. Okay? If you don't have a supply of US dollars, it can't work because there will be no dollars around. It will be finished. So where do these dollars come from? So the only countries in the world who have continued to have dollarization over a long period of time are in Latin America. Panama is one of them. And those are countries which have a special relationship with either the government of the United States or with the banking system in the United States, so they can get a good supply of dollars from there. That's condition number one. We don't have that, right? The only second way that we can get dollars, as you all know, is you have to earn it. How does a country earn dollars? It earns dollars through exports. It earns dollars through diaspora remittances. These are the way that we earn dollars. Now, as you all know, our imports in Zimbabwe are much more than our exports. So if imports are more than exports, we are not earning dollars. We are actually sending dollars out of the country. So these are the only two sources of supply of dollars, my friends. And we don't have either of them. So which means that dollarization cannot be a successful strategy on a long-term basis. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Now, of course, when it happened in 2009, it gave stability to the country. It gave stability to the market. It gave stability to prices, so it was good. But the government at that time should have made a plan in 2009 to move away from dollarization in 3 or 4 years. They did not. And so we are suffering from the consequences of not making a plan to move away from dollarization. Now let me just give you some simple facts. In 2009, we had about 600 million US dollars in real cash circulating in the economy, $600 million, okay? Currently, we have about $300 million. A lot of that money has gone out of Zimbabwe, legally or illegally. We have paid for imports. Before last year, the Reserve Bank had a regulation by which anybody could remit 10,000 US dollars without any questions asked. All you needed was some invoice from some company in Nigeria or Shanghai or whatever it was. So a lot of remittances were going out of the country. So you can't have, when you have a dollarized economy, everyone wants to get dollars from here. The Nigerians want to get dollars from here. The Somalis want to get dollars from here. The Indians want to get dollars from here. The Chinese want to get dollars from here. It can't work. Okay? So, of course, the Reserve Bank did something about this and they stopped that policy. But what I'm telling you is that today we have roughly $300 million circulating in the economy, partly in the banking system, partly informally, kumusha, everywhere. Okay? That amount of money is not enough for all your business purposes, for all our business purposes. And the governor himself has spoken recently. I had given them a figure some months ago that roughly speaking, we need about 1 billion US dollars in real cash to be circulating in Zimbabwe. Then we will not have such liquidity problems. The ATMs will have plenty of cash. When you go to the bank, you will be able to get whatever you want. But where is that 1 billion going to come from? We have no sources. Okay? So, the bottom line is that we are in a situation where there is a shortage of cash, there's a shortage of dollars, there's a shortage of foreign currency, and basically we have to move away from thinking that we are going to be with US dollars in the next couple of years. It's finished. Let's be very clear. We have to move into something different. So what are the alternatives? There are only two alternatives in economics. One alternative is that which has been adopted by the people in Europe. They have something called the EU. All the countries have got a common currency. So if you don't have your own currency, what you can do is adopt the currency of your major trading partner. It makes it easy for you. So tomorrow if we adopt the rand as our currency, it will make it easy for all of you or whoever wants to do cross-border trading. The rand is easily available. You can go to South Africa, you can get the rand. And the good thing about the rand is that nobody wants it outside this region. In South Africa, they want the rand. In Zimbabwe, they want the rand. Maybe to some extent in Zambia, Mozambique. But if you take the rand even to Nairobi, nobody is interested in the rand. So nobody is going to put it in their pocket and take it to Nairobi or Dubai or New York. It will stay here. Okay? So that is a solution to our problems, which is we go in the direction officially, not unofficially, officially. That's what I'm telling the government. Not that we say the people of Zimbabwe like the US dollars. But there are no US dollars, so let's face the fact. Let's do something different. Let's officially adopt the rand. That will be our currency. All prices will be in rand. All salaries, wages, ZESA bills, everything will be paid in rand. Okay? So that's one solution. And I'm hoping that our president is there with a big delegation. They're meeting Comrade Zuma. I hope this is one of the things that they discuss. So it doesn't require much. All it needs is that the South African authorities should agree to remove exchange control on the border. So if you have 1 million rand in your pocket, you can come across the border and it is quite legal. There's nothing wrong with that. Because where is that 1 million going to go? You're going to use it in Zimbabwe and then you're going to go back and buy goods in South Africa. So it's going to stay around here. It can't go anywhere. Okay? So that's one option. And I have been recommending that the government should drop the US dollar and use the rand for many years now. This is my position. If you read the newspapers, I have repeatedly said so. The second possibility is to have your own national currency. These are the only two options. There are no other options. Let's not dream now. There's no third option. If you can think of a third option, you can try and convince all the economics professors at UZ, but I don't think you will. So the problem with the national currency is that all countries have their own national currency and it's a good thing. But we lost trust in our own national currency because of what the Reserve Bank did before 2008. So we don't trust it. Tomorrow, if somebody says they're going to bring back the Zim dollars, we won't accept it. That's the problem. So we can't bring back the Zimbabwe dollar. So my friends in the Reserve Bank, they have gone the middle route. They have said, let's use multi-currency, US dollar, rand, but something in the middle called bond notes. Which is neither here nor there. I'm not for bond notes. It's not a good idea. But if you do have bond notes, to some extent it can succeed if you have certain rules about how it is issued. So far the Reserve Bank has been quite, well, they have kept their word. They said that they would issue under $200 million worth of bond notes, and I understand so far they have issued about $180 million worth of notes. But going forward, they're saying they're going to issue more. So that's a matter of concern. Okay. So the easy solution is, as I've repeatedly said in many forums, is to adopt the rand. That's the way to go. But currently we are in a situation where we have some US dollars, we have some rand, we have some bond notes, so it's a bit of a mix-up. And we need some clarity about how we go forward. Now, when we come to last week, so what I'm trying to say is that the situation on the liquidity front, on the currency front, is not a good one. And it needs, some decisions to be taken by the government. So let's talk about last week now. So one of the good things about the US dollar was that it kept prices and inflation under control. But the bad thing about the US dollar was that it's in short supply. And if something is in short supply, its price always goes up. Doesn't matter whether it's currency or a bottle of water or anything, or cooking oil. So when the US dollar is in short supply, it is inevitable that there will be a parallel market. And that's what has happened in Zimbabwe. We've got a parallel market which has been moving until last week, maybe 20, 25%, 30%. Bond notes were a bit better. So people were needing foreign exchange and therefore wanting to pay a little bit extra so that they could actually trade using that money. Now, that kind of situation over time, it gets a little bit worse and worse. It can't stay like that. So when you saw last week, suddenly there was a panic. There was no real reason for that panic because we have a shortage, but the country is not broke. We are not anywhere near 2007 and 2008. In 2008, the country had no money. Currently, our situation is, and you can note this down, that we earn $5 billion worth of foreign exchange every year. That is through exports, about $3.5 billion, $1 billion from diaspora remittances, that's $4.5 billion, plus we get a little bit of money from our development partners, and we get a little bit of money from foreign investors who come here. So there is $5 billion every year which is coming into Zimbabwe. Now, if this is managed properly, we will still have shortages, but we are not going to go towards 2007 or 2008. Okay. We are not in that situation. So, what I'm saying is that, yes, we have a shortage of foreign exchange. So, if you come to the people who produce cooking oil, they are importing their base material to make cooking oil. They are not being given enough foreign exchange. So, naturally, there will be some shortages, perhaps, to some extent, and maybe they will increase their price. I went to Bon Marché yesterday, and I found the price had gone up from 2 weeks ago. It was $3.39, and yesterday when I saw it was $3.85. So, but there were about 200 bottles over there. So Bon Marché, there was plenty. So that's an increase of about 12 or 13%. So there will be some small increases in prices for everything that has got some imported content in it, because we are short of foreign exchange. But there is no reason to panic. Foreign exchange is there. There is enough foreign exchange. If the Reserve Bank behaves itself and is prudent and careful, there's enough foreign exchange to import fuel. There's enough foreign exchange to pay for the power supplies from Eskom, South Africa. There is some money to pay for other imports, oil imports or other imports, basic commodities. So we are not going in that situation. And I don't think anybody should panic. Okay? Now, that is not to say everything is good. I'm not saying that. We are in a difficult situation and we need to do things better. But today's talk today is not about economic policy. Maybe my colleague Naomi will talk about what policies we need to put in place to improve the economy. So my message to you is, yes, we have a problem because we have a shortage of foreign exchange, Dollarization, let me tell you, is on its way out. US dollars can't work. We have no US dollars. But there's no need for panic because the government is earning $5 billion per year, which is not enough for all our requirements. If we had maybe $7 billion a year, we'd be okay. But it's very difficult to move from 5 to 7. It takes time. So we are going to have difficulties. There will be some price increases. But at the same time, for basic commodities, I think the situation is quite good. When coming to basic commodities, I just want to mention, on the maize front, we all know it, that we've had a good harvest. Thank you. Thanks to the Lord and thanks to the good rainfall that we had. But we also had a good program, which is, the name is not correct. Somehow, I don't know why they called it Command Agriculture. But anyway, the idea was quite a good one, which was to give inputs to those people who could produce surplus maize. So the idea was good. You gave it to people who had some land and who could produce, and so they have produced surplus maize. So we are okay on the maize front. We are reasonably okay on the foreign exchange front, although we have some problems. So we are moving along slowly, but we are not in a situation where, unfortunately, I can say the economy is going to grow and we are going to get rich very quickly. Now, on the one thing that I would just like to mention is that I think it's very important for all of you to think how... So this is ridiculous. As I told the Commissioner General the other day, I said, please let the tree grow and have fruit, then we can pluck it. But if you start breaking off all the young shoots, there's going to be nothing. Huh? So, there is no informal sector policy, and I would strongly recommend to you and your representatives that you must influence government in the informal sector area. The reason I say this is because today it is well known that the informal economy is more than 50% of Zimbabwe's economy. It's very important. And what we need is the way that other countries have dealt with the informal sector. We talk about Look East policy. So if you look at China, India, other countries in that part, is that they encourage the informal sector. They encourage the informal sector so that it grows. And when it grows, you are no longer informal because you formalize and then Zimbra can come and tax you. That's okay. So we need an informal sector policy, and you have to lobby for a policy that this government has, which creates what we call a good enabling environment, a good environment for you to grow with minimum regulation, with minimum hassles, with minimum taxation, and minimum interaction with government regulators. We need that, but it's not there. So one of the things, I know a colleague is actually, they are going to have an informal sector workshop, I think on the 19th of October. I will give the details to the Women's Coalition. And I would suggest that you contact them. You must come there. But that's a dialogue within the private sector. But you have to lobby now with the concerned ministries. There is a ministry on this one, and really people like me, many people like me will support it. But it's you who are the stakeholders. You have to speak up. It's not us. We support you. Okay? So informal sector, you have to now think in terms of how you can get all your organizations to have a good informal sector policy in Zimbabwe which supports everything that you're doing. To give you one example, I can't remember the country. Like in many countries, if you have an enterprise which is less than 5 workers, or you have an income which is less than, I don't know, $50,000 or something like that, there's no tax, there's no registration, there's no nothing. You just do what you have to do. Do your business. It's only when you grow, then people expect you to register and do all these things. So I would like you to think very seriously about mainstreaming your activities to get the government to have a good informal sector policy with regulations and incentives which support your work. That's the first point I want to make. The second thing is that we are also working on something called the ease of doing business that I'm specifically working on. To give you an idea of the kinds of things we are doing over there, of course, we do it across the economy. So I am the national coach for the mining sector. So one of the things we are doing over there is, as I've already mentioned to you, as you know that the small scale and artisanal gold miners, the Makorokozas, they are producing almost half of Zimbabwe's gold output. They are very important people. And yet in the law, they are criminals. This is ridiculous. So our committee and I'm in that committee. We are working on decriminalizing what they do. We want to change the Gold Trade Act, which criminalizes their activities, and we are going to do it. And what we also want to do, we are currently working with the Ministry of Mines to give a special permit to anybody who's a small-scale miner. So anyone who is mining in an area which is less than 1 hectare and is not using some big equipment, but basically shovels and buckets and a few small things, we want to legalize their activities so that once you get your certificate, and it will only cost you $10 to be a legal small-scale miner. So we are working on things like that. So it is not that the government is not thinking about these things, but these are things that are coming out of the heads of people like me who say, but small-scale miners, half of gold output, why are they illegal? Let's do something. But you are the stakeholders, you have to speak up. You have to come on the table and say, no, these are the things that are important for us. So there are committees in government which are looking at a lot of things. And I would encourage you all to, although we have got lots of problems, but at least if you engage, if you start coming onto the table and coming up with your issues, more people will listen to you, and hopefully we can jointly do something which is to the common benefit of all of you and the common benefit of the country. So I will stop now. I can, I'm a professor of economics. I give lectures which is for 3.5 hours. So we can go on till lunch. I can continue talking. But that's not the purpose of this engagement. I will not go into broader economic policy issues, but I just wanted to give you a feeling for why we are where we are today and what is likely to happen in the next 3 to 4 months going up to December. So I will hand over, I think, to someone who has a broader perspective on the economy now. Thank you.
Is at the core. Dialogue is at the core. Yes, there is going to be a plenary period, but please note your questions. I want to believe that Prof. Chakravarti's presentation becomes holistic when we put it together with Naomi's presentation. But just noting the issue of dialogue is very important. There are the positives and there are the negatives. Have we noted? Naomi, we would like, I think some of us have dialogued with Naomi at different levels. She's an economist and a senior researcher with the Labor and Economic Development Research Institute of Zimbabwe, LEDRIZ. She holds a Master's of Arts in Economics and Development from the Institute of Social Studies. She has worked in research, training, capacity building, decent work, agenda, gender, climate change, and all the green jobs. Rather than reading from here, I actually know that Naomi is one of the advocates for the pro-poor policies, and she was part of the research known as Beyond the Enclave towards pro-poor and development strategies in Zimbabwe. Now we want to know, as women who are within that space where we are contributing to more than 50% of the economy, as informal sector, as traders, as participants at different levels, to what extent we can begin dialoguing. It may not be so easy, Prof, to just walk in and start dialoguing. So Naomi, give us the hands-on. We started from the broad, now we are coming to the down to earth, and we actually want you to get us into it so that we can already begin fine-tuning those questions. And when we have the plenary, we are actually asking the questions that if Prof needs to respond to a Naomi adds or vice versa, we are moving with it. Naomi, shall we give her a hand?
Good morning to you, everyone. Good morning to you, everyone. I would like to thank Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe for inviting me to come here to present to you on the overview of the Zimbabwean economy, what is happening in the economy. And I would also want to thank Professor Ashok for giving us a very in-depth, actually, analysis of where we have come from and where we are and why we are here. And as he was saying, I was thinking that he has made my life very much easier because I will be just saying as what Professor Ashok said. Okay, let me get into the presentation. The good thing about the Zimbabwean economy is that most of the challenges, the major challenges that we are facing, right, are all in front of us. And when someone is asked to speak about the economy, what Professor Ashok has said is also some of the issues that I had prepared myself from the title of the presentation that I was given. And I will do some little bit of implications, but I'll leave that to the next session, which is session number 2. And then I'll also try and give some recommendations going forward for us as women within this context that we are struggling with, most of us in Zimbabwe. And I think I would start from saying that where we are right now in Zimbabwe, I think for the past year or so, I'll start from there up to where we are now. The challenge is emanating from the fact that whenever, and I think this is familiar with most of us, whenever there is an election, 2, 3, 4 years before, or maybe let me say 2, 3 years before the election, the environment is not stable in Zimbabwe. And we have witnessed this not only in the past election period, but even beyond. And one of the challenges, again, that comes along with that is that usually it's political expediency that overrides the economics or the economic rationale or what should be done at the economic level or policy level to address the challenges that most of us are facing. So that's my first disclaimer, to say where we are right now, what is happening where we are, and the lack thereof of policies and strategies which need to be put in place, the right ones, is because of the political environment that we are in Zimbabwe, and we cannot run away from it and link it to the election period as well. And I would also want to buttress that where we are right now, the challenge we have with most of our government institutions is the strategies that they are putting in place are more of firefighting rather than concrete policies that should address or take people out of their real poverty situations in Zimbabwe. Why am I saying firefighting? For example, recently we had the SI instrument that is criminalizing, for example, dealing of foreign currency on the parallel market, right? It's a situation, the parallel market is real, it's with us because of the environment that Professor Ashok has said. But criminalizing it, do you think that it is the real solution to the problem that we have? So most of the solutions that are being provided are more of firefighting rather than addressing the real challenges that are on the ground, because even if it is criminalized in the public, but does it necessarily mean that the dealings have stopped? There are always ways, because of the loopholes that we have in our economy and because of the need for survival. The need for survival. Need for survival is coming from the fact that, as he has said, Professor Ashok, we no longer have the industry, a running industry in Zimbabwe that should be spearheading economic development. We have suffered economic regression. We have suffered in Zimbabwe moving from high levels of productivity with industry to low levels of productivity, which is coming with the informal economy. In any economy, to run efficiently, there has to be action at the industry level. If we do not have that happening, we are bound to suffer the regression that we are suffering. I'll just give you some of the statistics that have been given that since January, I'll just give the recent ones. January to June, right? There are about 163 companies that have applied for retrenchment. Within that period. And about 2,000 workers have been affected. And where are those workers going? Where are we going? Vana baba vedu, vana mai vedu who are being retrenched, where are they going? into the informal economy, isn't it? And some of them are males who are coming from the formal sector, joining the formally dominated female environment, the informal economy. And because of that, there is now stiff competition now between males and females. You can actually see the gender dimensions within the informal economy, right? And the fact that most of the activities that women used to do are now being overtaken by some of the males who are economically or better economically empowered, right, than us women. So in the end, what is happening is that women are being further pushed into at the base of the informal economy where there is a lot of decent work deficits. That is why we had a incident, I think in 2014, where a mother's baby was crushed by a municipality police vehicle as she was trying to run away from the municipality police. And this is us women who are gathered here, right? Imagine if you were in that kind of a scenario, how devastating it would be. So, because of the lack of industrialization in Zimbabwe and therefore the high informality rates in Zimbabwe, poverty has continued. And it is poverty that drives people to find any means possible to survive if there is no concrete strategy to deal with the problem, to take people back into productive economic activities. So those are some of the challenges that we are currently facing here in Zimbabwe. And when people are in poverty, anything can happen for survival, isn't it? I think you remember takamboita to my popcorn activities where social unrest grows within people. The further you put even an elastic band, you can stretch it, but there's a certain level or time where it just breaks because it can no longer take the pressure or the heat. And it is because of that you find most of us in the informal economy trading in the parallel market, which has been criminalized for now. But that is not the solution to the problem. 10-year jail, that is not. Yes, it may reduce the informal economy activities, but there is no hope that that money is still going to come back within the formal institutions. Right. And I would also want to draw ourselves to the attention of the Fiscal study that was undertaken in 2012. Where are we as women in the informal economy? That study in 2012, right, it targeted 2.8 million businesses. And out of the 2 million of the 2.8, 53% were female individual entrepreneurs, right? And the 800 left, 54% were still female. So it really shows how this economy, right, the importance of us as women participating in this economy and making the economy run. And I think 2008 made us aware of the critical role that women play, especially when we looked at the cross-border activities that were happening and women putting food on the table for their families, right? So those statistics are for us to say as we go forward and as we lobby, we need to understand where we are as women, right? That we are in the majority of what is happening even in the informal economy, right? Unfortunately, as we are in the informal economy, there is huge financial exclusion of women. Financial exclusion. It is a problem. Why am I saying financial exclusion? Because for us as women to be able to grow our businesses, even when we are in the informal economy, we need to be linked somehow to a financial institution, isn't it, for us to get capital, right? But the statistics that we had then, it was 2012, and I'm sure by now the statistics have increased. It was the study indicated that 44% of women were in informal financial arrangements as compared to 35% males. So 44 versus 35 informal arrangements. These informal arrangements are good in that they keep our lives running, isn't it? Anamukando, isn't it? Masako, anotaurwa, savings, investment programs, they have made us to be where we are as women in Zimbabwe. But however, they limit us from the broader picture of growing our economies and growing our businesses. So what we need to do is to ensure financial inclusion of women, strategies that ensure that women get into the financial streams, are empowered, and even the financial institutions support the women with their level of ability and with their level of contribution. Because currently, if you look at the programs or the schemes that are there from the financial institutions, most of them are targeting big companies. They are not targeting grower my value addition project or value addition initiative. No. And most of all, I don't even have the collateral and to be able to access the finance, to be able to grow. The reason why most of us are remaining small scale is not because we want to, but it's because the policy space, right, and the environment still has got inhibiting factors for us as women to be able to access credit. So as long as we remain financially excluded in the economy, we are not going to grow even our businesses that we are talking about here. We are not going to sustain ourselves to greater lengths or to contribute even more to the economic performance, right? We also want to look at the issue of climate. The moderator, the facilitator indicated that I'm looking at the issue of green jobs and climate. You know, most of us women, we are in agriculture, isn't it? We are doing agriculture. And it is one of the climate sensitive sectors. Over 90% of women, right, or of the population rather, relies on rain-fed agriculture. And most of us women, that's where we are, isn't it? At subsistence level, even if it is urban agriculture, at subsistence level. Any climatic shock will generally affect me. And that's where, because we don't have the formal jobs, we don't have any productive jobs that we have, we are relying on these subsistence economic activities to make our lives run, right? So what we would want to see more is, or are strategies that ensure that more women are engaged in climate mitigation programs, in climate adaptation programs. Because unless we do so, we are still going to remain very vulnerable to the climatic shocks. And that would affect also our businesses. And looking at the gender dimensions, even in the formal sector, you'd find that women generally earn, and this was indicated in the Interim Poverty Reduction Strategy paper of 2006, women generally earn an average of about 2/3 of men's income. Why? Why is it so? Because we are dominating in the low remunerating sectors of the economy. So how do we move from there? How do those gender disparities need to be addressed? It's a question. And these are some of the issues that we need also to be probing and also trying to find ways, even as we dialogue, finding the right institutions that are dealing with these issues to address our concerns. I want to look at some of the issues that relate to our development as well, and looking at an indicator called the Human Development Index, right? In Zimbabwe, in 2016, Zimbabwe was ranked 154 out of 188 in terms of the Human Development Index. 154 out of 188. We only managed to override a few countries, right? And this Human Development Index is critical because it shows us the level of human dignity in Zimbabwe as well, right? Because it takes into account issues to do with education levels, issues to do with access to health, issues to do with access to water and sanitation and so on. So we have a long way to go as Zimbabwe. Another challenge, which unfortunately is not being addressed adequately in Zimbabwe when we look at the economy, is the issue of the illicit financial flows. illicit financial flows, draining our economy. And I think Professor Ashok mentioned some of the issues. Unless we plug these leakages, right, we are not going to address the issue of liquidity challenge, which was highlighted by Professor Ashok. In 2015, right, the Minister of Finance indicated that 1.2 billion was externalized. 1.2 billion. That's a major resource that we are talking about. And if it had been plugged back into the economy, even to the industry, how much more would we have seen positively at the industrial side, right? And that was 2015, right? And that was about 33% of our exports being externalized. What does it mean? It means that if this is not addressed, we'll still continue to bleed. The economy will still continue to bleed. There are those who talk about the debt. I think Zimcod is in a better place to even talk more about it. But it is one of the challenges that Zimbabwe is facing. In the face of liquidity challenges, how are we going even to resolve the debt? Even the processes that are being planned on addressing the arrears, right? To what extent are we as women participating in those processes? Right? What is our role in those processes? We should not see it as an abstract issue, debt, right? We should see it as part and parcel of our daily lives, because our children's children are still going to suffer because of this debt if it remains unresolved, and if we remain outside the box and do not participate in these processes that are happening at national level. And I think going forward, governance indicators that we have in Zimbabwe, I want to call it a governance indicators trap that we are in Zimbabwe. If we look at our global competitiveness, ease of doing business, I'm happy Professor Ashok said that there's some progress that is happening. But I think with the level that we are here in Zimbabwe, the process has to be faster than what is currently happening. Even if we look to the issue of what is called the transparency, the corruption perception index, which is calculated by Transparency International. It's saying that in 2016-2017, Zimbabwe was ranked 154 out of 176 in terms of the index. So what does it mean? Even we are crying for investment, we are crying for decent jobs, but if our environment is not conducive enough, these are the signals that investors look at. These are the indicators that investors look at, right? Before they even come to look at what is happening to me selling on the streets of Zimbabwe, these are the indicators that most of the investors look at. And if they are so deplorable like this, we may just, what do we do? I can see some depressed faces. Please let us not just get depressed. Let's start thinking of what to do. But these indicators, this trap that we are in, has to be addressed one way or the other, right? And if you look at the major constraints that are inhibiting competitiveness in Zimbabwe, it's not about issues of labor rights, like what some government institutions say, right? The World Economic Forum indicated that political instability was the major constraint undermining doing business in Zimbabwe. It ranked it at a percentage point of 24.6, followed by access to financing. Remember, I talked about access to financing as it regards us women. Access to financing was ranked number 2nd as the second major constraint undermining doing business in Zimbabwe. Corruption was the 3rd one at 12.7. That we did in 2015 revealed that 442 companies that participated in the survey that we did, 80,000 workers were affected by what we call wage theft. So wage theft is whether you don't get your salary or your salary is staggered, because according to international labor regulations, you have to be paid after giving your services, right? So we are talking about 80,000 workers being affected in 2015 only. And earlier on, I gave you some statistics that more than 2,000 people between January and June had been affected by retrenchment, right? And where are these people going? Back into the informal economy, right? And most of the information that we have here, if we look at the companies, right, that were affected, these were the urban councils. Those who are supposed to be providing our social services that we are crying for. Motor industry, railways, medicals, and the list goes on and on. So this is the state that we are in when we come now to the industry and look at wages and salary. Women leadership, where are we, right? We are lagging far behind the 50% target according to the National Gender Policy. So whether it's be it cabinet ministers, ambassadors, permanent secretaries, principal directors, deputy directors in our institutions, we are far from reaching the 50% peg that we gave ourselves. And this is all the issue of dialogue and participation. Where are we as women? I think the highest percentage that we have is of permanent secretaries, which is about 30% who are women. Cabinet ministers 19.2 versus the 50%. What are we doing as women to ensure that our voices are heard in the political and also in the policy spaces? So what are we yearning for? What do we want to see? What are we yearning for? Decent jobs, investment, and inclusive and sustainable growth at national and also at community level, right? And what must be done? This is where I am going to finalize my presentation, right? As I said earlier on, political expediency is overriding economic rationale. I think for me, it's going back to the basics. Even when we look at our national budget, I saw on the program, we're going to be talking about the national budget. Is our national budget right-based? Is it prioritizing the social services which are pertinent to us as women? Issues of health, issues of education, water and sanitation. So we need to bring back at the core of our national budget or any other developmental policy, is it rights-based? Is it prioritizing the rights of the people? Because these rights are the enablers for economic growth. If you don't have education, if you don't have health, how are you supposed to be contributing positively or concretely to the economy when these rights are not there? The second issue is about the proper management of the external debt. I've mentioned the issue, and Simcode, I'm sure, will mention more. The third thing is about improving our fiscal space. Unfortunately, what is happening in Zimbabwe is that we are eating more than we are killing. I'll borrow from a Tendaibitis statement. We used to laugh about that. You eat what you what? What you kill, right? And where are we as Zimbabweans when we come to that issue? We are not eating what we are killing. Madzimai, right? If you look at the levels of debt that we have in Zimbabwe, domestic debt, it has grown at an alarming level of more than 25% of our GDP. So the government is borrowing. Borrowing is not bad, but if you don't pay back, it becomes a what? And the other thing is, what are you using those funds to do? Yeah. Is it into productive use or is into consumptive use? Let's check ourselves as we go on to these dialogues that we want to see ourselves upgrading. Improving fiscal space. So plugging illicit financial flows is one of it. And also addressing the culture of corruption with impunity is one of the other issues that we have to put on the fore. Corruption, how should it be addressed, which is hemorrhaging our economy. And for example, I'll just talk about these 15 billion diamond revenues. Up to now, we don't know what happened to it. Figure out if this had been plugged back into our economy, plugged back into our industry, how many jobs could have been created? And we need to refocus our fiscal expenditures towards social services and capital expenditures. We need also to clarify some of our policies that we have. For example, the indigenization policy that we have in Zimbabwe. There have been varied interpretations, and it depends with which minister is talking. And there have been so many conflicts over this. And this is one of the signals that investors look at the policy space. Remember, I said one of the major policy constraints was policy inconsistency, right? Accelerating ease of doing business. I think Professor has said much about it, right? And when we come to the issue of formalizing, which is the last point that I want to, formalizing the informal economy, I think the first step that needs to be addressed is how many of us are participating in the current processes that are happening. Formalizing. Can I just see by raise of hand? Well, there are processes that are already ongoing with the Ministry of SMS. You see, less than 1%, it's 0.0 something actually if you calculate it, right? And yet we are saying that's where we are as women. We are in the informal economy. And we are in this economy that is criminalized most of the cases. The fastest sprinters that you can now call here in Zimbabwe are who? Women. Why? Because we were sprinting in school? And we got the skills? No. It's the running battles that are happening. And this is where we are as women in the informal economy. So let's start interrogating these processes that are ongoing. Let's start making sure that we are part and parcel of this. Where I come from, we say, right? You have to participate in the process. Right. So when we come to formalization, we need to acknowledge, the process has to acknowledge the diversity of informality. We have women at various levels. Women who are up there, women who are at the middle level, women who are at the lower echelons of the economy, right? And is that strategy going to address all those stratas that we have? And mind you, not everyone anyway is going to become formalized in the process. And let's go there into the processes, defining the type of formalization that we want to see. Not this one of just taxing us without giving us services. Because we are already being taxed, isn't it? Left, right, and center. Mind you, Zimbabwe is the number one country which is highly taxed in Zimbabwe, and which has got the more revenues that come from different facets of the economy. Within sub-Saharan Africa, we are number one. Number one. Like in 2016, we contributed about 22 to 23 the government revenues through taxation. But in some sub-Saharan Africa, it was around 18%. So you can already see the margin. It's very huge. But where is that tax going? 30%. It's 30% now, yes. 30% versus 18%. Woo, that's a lot. What are we doing as women in terms of ensuring that revenue comes back to invest in areas that we want invested, right? Let's think about those issues. Finally, my last word is to say that poverty is not an accident. Poverty is not a what? Yes. This was said by Nelson Mandela, saying that like slavery and apartheid, it is man-made and can be removed by the actions of human beings. But now I'm saying it can be removed by our action as women, right? Because we have the major share of women participating in the economy. And we cannot let things continue with like this in doldrums. And we are speaking from outside. We have to be inside the processes, is what Professor Ashok is saying. So this is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. And I think as we go forward, or maybe I left out some things which may probably be addressed during the question and answer session. I'll be available to do that. But this is the situation, economic situation that we have upon what had been built on by Professor Ashok. So thank you very much for listening. I've just provided this so that we tweak our mind. Thank you very much.
I'll just get us back to the discussion, I think I have roving mics for the plenary sessions, maybe just to jog your minds a bit. The last presentation, Naomi says, corruption is hemorrhaging the economy. Who better understands the word hemorrhage than women? She also says, women's participation in formalizing the economy is key. To what extent are we participating? And then she says, poverty is not an accident. It will take women to remove it, to do away with it. I am just re-jogging our memories and correlating Naomi's presentation to Prof. Ashok's presentations, which were very profound, both presentations, and which actually got us thinking, if we are contributing more than 50% or 40%, or whatever the figures are, but I know it's a very significant figure of the economy. Where are we at the table? Prof said we need to dialogue. I'm inviting questions, and even as I'm looking around for your hands, I'm going to be asking Naomi and Prof to tell us how to occupy those spaces for our voices to be heard, to tell us how to get those financial institutions to begin to realize or acknowledge us as key players. I'm looking around for your hands, ladies, because I want to take more than...
My name is Anna Chibama. I write for New Zimbabwe. My question regards to us women who are in informal sector. I'm a freelance journalist, and I earn a little bit more, but I'm not accommodated in the financial sector. Like in the bank, they want a pay slip. And even if I want to buy furniture in a shop, they do not accept me because I don't have a pay slip, but I'm earning more than like a teacher. So how can we be the people in the informal sector be helped in such circumstances? Thank you.
Morning. My name is Ruth Butawamocho from the Herald. My question is directed to Professor Ashok. I think you really called for the need for us to rally behind the adoption of the RAND. So I'm thinking, what are some of the implications in the long term should we really adopt the RAND as a nation? Thank you.
Morning, everyone, or afternoon. My name is Imelda Vididi, and I'm with Cultivate Africa. Mine is more of a contribution, and I'll start with a quote by Shelley Chisholm, which says that if they don't give you a seat at the table, you bring a folding chair. And I'm looking at the issue of financial inclusion. I see a trend where a lot of key people, key decision makers, dish out information only when they're invited to a certain platform. But then my sister here was asking about how do we access the funds. And the Deputy Governor of the RBZ was talking about some act of 2017, movable property, and then a credit guarantee scheme that supports people with no assets. So there's money out there and there's a way to access it, but the information is what we do not have. So I think earlier on we engaged the RBZ and we spoke to the governor himself and we got information. We need to get back there again and ask questions that can help empower us as women. Thank you.
My name is Phyllis Kachere. I am from the Herald, but right now I'm here in my personal capacity. My questions are directed at the Prof and at Naomi. Prof, you talked of the lack of the informal sector policy. And I'm wondering, Zimbabwe is boasted of degreed people, mastered people, doctored people, professored people, and we still don't have an informal sector policy. And then the second question is with Naomi. Naomi, you keep talking of we don't have this, so what are we doing as women? We haven't done this, so what are we doing as women? I like the question, but you are not empowering my mother who is in Budiriro to get in. How does she get in? You are not advising, you are not saying, okay, the entry point is A, B, C, D. You are simply asking my mother, and my mother is wondering, so how do I get there? Thank you.
Let me answer some of the questions raised. Okay, on the first question about someone who is earning and not having a pay slip, yes, it is a problem, but going forward, I think that there is a solution which is being put in place. The Companies Act is actually currently being amended, and I think it's in its final stages, and a new instrument is being introduced, which is called a private business corporation. It's a very, very simple registered entity with very low levels of accountability and reporting. And you will be able to register PBC for $20 with the Registrar of Companies. So I hope in the next 3 to 4 months or within the next 6 months you have an instrument. You as an individual could register as a PBC even as one individual, and you will then be accepted by the banking system as a formal entity. So that's the information I have. And I completely agree with the lady who spoke about there is a lot of information out there and it doesn't come to the stakeholders. On financial inclusion, as you know, the Reserve Bank has been working on a collateral registry for movable assets, which means that movable assets can also be included in terms of being used as collateral for a bank loan. I would actually recommend that your coalition approach Dr. Mlambo, you spoke about the Deputy Governor, and you should have a workshop or a seminar for women's groups on what measures are being put in place by the Reserve Bank and the banking system, which make it easier to access loans and facilities from the financial sector. I'm sure they will respond very positively on such a thing. But there is things which are happening, and I think that information needs to be extended to stakeholders. Informal sector policy, and finally the RAND. On informal sector policy, it's only recently, my dear, that there's been an acceptance by the government that it's not a bad thing. You will recall that Minister Chinamasa only about 12 months ago said that this is the new normal, and we have to accept it and see what we can do. So now there is an acceptance that the informal sector is a very important part of the economy. Prior to that, there was not much thinking about what is the appropriate policy to develop it, to create an enabling environment, to create a situation where the informal sector can be encouraged. The previous thinking was formalize the informal sector so that you can tax it. That was the previous thinking. So it takes some time, and I would, that's why I'm trying to encourage your group and others to become a part of the dialogue on developing an informal sector policy in Zimbabwe. One of the events that is happening quite soon is on the 17th of October. There is actually a dialogue amongst, with the private sector dialogue on the informal sector, and a number of papers are being presented there. I will hand over the information to Sally, and hopefully she can invite people to come over there and participate. And I would certainly...
I'll start with the question that has been asked by my sister, to say more questions than what should be done. Okay, I will profile to you some of the entry points that are available for us. The entry points and strategies also that are available for us. I was, I think yesterday, I'll start with that story. Yesterday, I was shocked to receive an email which was indicating that there are some budget consultative forums that are ongoing at community level, right? And it's almost like halfway across the galaxy. They're almost about to finish. I link it with the issue of information that was highlighted, right? There are so many platforms, but that is one of the platforms. I don't know to what extent we can mobilize ourselves with the remaining days that we have. Was it going to run? I think I got the email from Zimport. Someone, yeah, that gave me that information. You can check with the dates when that process is going to end. But it's a short-lived process. That is the problem. So if we do not manage to get ourselves there now, and this is the budget, we may find that we still remain outside of the policy context that we should be participating as women. Another entry point, I think, as an individual, we cannot achieve anything. I think we all agree with that. But as a collective voice, we can achieve better outcomes, right? So I am encouraging that those who are not yet, especially when I'm looking at the informal economy, those who are not yet participating in any informal economy association or organization, which is authentic. I have to underline the word authentic because there are so many of them that are just indicating they are briefcase organizations, faking that they are representing people on the informal economy, but yet they are not. So we should increase our own intelligence as women. We should increase our own intelligence and find out who is doing what and where, rather than being waiting to be called to a platform or to a forum where our issues are being discussed. Visit the state institutions which are responsible, like the RBZ. They are doing a lot of work on trying to integrate or financially include women into the processes. So let's increase our intelligence also as women to ensure that we are not left out in what is happening, whether be it on the finance, whether be it on the social aspects. And I also want to say that if we are not on the table, someone said if you are not on the table, you are definitely the menu. Right? So if you don't go on the table, you are definitely going to be on the menu. Right. So let's go with that mantra. Right? If we are not on the table, definitely I don't want to be a menu. Right? I also want to make my voice heard to improve situations and so forth. And there are a lot of initiatives by the Gender Commission that we have. I understand that they are running a forum in October. So let's also try and engage them to see how we can also participate in those processes, because these are the government processes, and that's also how we can get our voices heard in those processes. So we can find a lot. These are some of the entry points. There are so many, but we need to increase our intelligence as women. Thank you.
Of how important it is to participate. So I told you I was involved in the mining sector committee. So one of the things, as you know, is that we have something called a Precious Stones Act. So if you find an emerald or some precious stone while you're, in your agricultural land and you pick it up, you're actually a criminal. It's something which is illegal, as you know. So the Ministry of Mining, thanks to much discussion that we have been having with them, has been having consultations all over the country about the Precious Stones Act. And I don't know how many of you have participated in that, or if any of you are makoroposas or doing anything in the mining sector. But one of the things that came out of the consultations, and that's very important therefore what Naomi is saying, participation, is that most of the people said that this act is just silly. If you find some precious stones while you're farming, there should be nothing illegal about it. And in fact, you should be allowed to collect it, and there should be some mechanism like MMCZ, or Minerals Marketing Authority, which has a market once a month in which they invite people to buy, and you can go and sell over there. So I was in a meeting just last week, and the director concerned, she reported back that this is the feedback that she got from all over the country, people saying that the act should be changed. And so our committee is now looking at changing the act. We are going to change it to legalize at least semi-precious stones all over the country. So you have to participate in this kind of thing. Otherwise, the information does not get through to the right people who have the ability to change the regulatory environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Charity Mandishona from Zimbabwe Chamber of Informal Economy Association. And first and foremost, I would like to applaud the women in the informal economy because they are doing a great job keeping the economy moving, feeding the children, sending children to school with the mega monies they have without any support from the government. First and foremost, when they do the national budget, there is no budget line for the informal economy. That's point number one. Point number two, I'm really disappointed that now we are going towards elections. People are starting now talking about informal economy, informal economy. To us, the politicians abuse women in the informal economy because they know they are the majority and they do go and vote. But after voting, they don't deliver as they had promised. At 4th Street Labour Stop, we have over 2,000 informal traders. But to my surprise, there is no toilet, there is no infrastructure, but they pay Every day they pay $1.25, 25 cents goes towards taxes. So it's not about taxing, because we already in the informal economy, we are paying tax left, right, and center. We have preemptive tax, we have duty when we are traveling cross-border traders, and there at the market store, we also pay tax, but there's no service delivery coming back to us. To me, and they are running battles with the informal trader. But she is fending for the family. And now our market has been invaded by men. And men are using vehicles, they are using swipe machines. And where do we leave the women, that poor women from the rural area, who is trying to fend for her family, even to send children to school?
Thank you. Thank you. If we can make our questions very...
The current director of Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development. Current, because I'm on my way out, we believe in succession. So I want to thank Professor and Naomi for their presentations. And I just want to ask maybe clarity from Professor Ashok around the issue of randization of our economy. And I think I like the idea, but I'm saying the people who are in the rand economy, Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, Swaziland, they have their local currencies, Maluti, Elangeni in Swaziland and Pula. So what is it that, what are your recommendations for Zimbabwe? So that at least we go into that economy after we have grown, or parallel to us growing our own industry, so that we go in with a proper currency, just like the other countries who are in the rand economy. So I thought I wanted some clarity around that. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you.
Very challenging insights that you've shared with us this afternoon. My name is Titsima Rade. I'm a consultant and an individual member of the Women's Coalition. So what is already coming to my mind, because to some extent I think quite a number of us in this space already are aware of maybe some of those initiatives, but we're not completely seized with the processes. And therefore, I'm already thinking that as the coalition, we now need to strategize at two levels. At one level, we need to now strategize to plug ourselves into existing processes. And thank you for already highlighting the entry points now, those were very powerful. And therefore, I'm wondering, those of us that are already in this space, what else is happening so that we can already use this as an opportunity to appreciate what's going on and where we really need to plug ourselves into seeing already there's a dearth of information. We don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. And therefore you cannot plug into something that you don't even know exists. So I'm motivating for us in this space to already, I think, harvest knowledge about what is already going on as a basis for us as the coalition to then, immediately after this meeting, to strategize for that. And then there's another level which is really about lobby and advocacy. And I think we now need to start hit the ground running in that sense, because we know that with the elections coming, there are also going to be a lot of other opportunities that we can already capitalize on as we try to address these issues. So I guess I'm motivating, starting with the two of you, to tell us what else is happening out there that we also need to know. Because I know your time for the presentations was a bit short, but I just feel that it's very urgent that we are plugging ourselves into this. And my third comment just has to do with the structural nature of the barriers that actually exclude us as women. We are aware that there's the financial inclusion strategy of the RBZ. But if you look at maybe some of the structures and the committees that have been set around it, I don't personally think that we're doing enough to also address the specific gender barriers that relate to women accessing those financial products and services. And we also need to be in a position to lobby for change of those things. And I know that you are also, especially Prof, you are also very privileged, because I think you can also help us to already begin to, I think, unshackle some of these barriers. So if you can also give us a bit of insight into that, I think that would be powerful. I was already whispering to my sister Moira, who is the director of ProWeb, and I was saying, you actually have your agenda cut out for you. Because with the mining sector and what's happening there, and also your call for us to also avail, maybe to be present at the 19 October dialogue, I think we already need to identify some of the strategic partners within the Women's Coalition that can actually move forward this agenda. But I think we'll only be able to do that if we are very clear about what is happening, where and how and with whom, so that we're able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
I'm with Zimbabwean Women in Politics Alliance. My question is directed to Professor Ashok Chakra. On the 29th, it was published that responded by saying that was quite misleading, and we still haven't heard from you what the actual inflation rate is. And it is critical for us women to be able to understand what is going on in our economy. But we are always disenfranchised because you don't always tell us what exactly is happening in our economy. Or if there are reports about what is going on with our economy, it is biased and not meant for us to be able to plan. There is a problem of inconsistent monetary and fiscal policies. And I would like to ask you this question right now. Who is pegging these rates, these eco-cash rates, these RTGS rates? Because they adversely affect the activities of the informal sector. We really want to know who is doing this and how this can be addressed, because most of the people in Zimbabwe are informal traders and their activities are grossly affected by these rates, which just change willy-nilly in the course of the day. Thank you.
These issues, because at the end of the day, it's affecting us as women more, and we are also the major contributors towards the economy building. But I wanted to make emphasis on the need then for us to disseminate this information that we have been given here. I know one of the sisters raised an issue on what happens to our mothers and sisters, those who are within the high density suburbs, because at times we just assume that when we get this kind of information, then everybody else has received the same information. Then at the end of the day, when we sit here and discuss these things, it's only us and a few more who benefit. And then at the end of the day, we don't really make a huge impact in terms of us even claiming those spaces that we're being talked about. So I think it's something that we seriously need to consider, that we need then, through the structures that we have within Women's Coalition, to take this information to everyone. Because I know we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's an easy one. What we are recommending for Zimbabwe is slightly different from what is happening in what we call the Rand monetary area, the common monetary area. So in the common monetary area, one of the conditions is that you actually join it officially and you've got to have your own currency. That is not suitable for Zimbabwe. If you go back to 2009, you will remember that it was not the US dollar, it was the Rand which was the major currency in circulation. And we adopted it informally. In other words, without joining the Rand monetary area. You see, one of the concerns about that some senior politicians may have is the question of sovereignty. Yeah. If you join the Rand monetary area or the common monetary area, you are under the control of the South African Reserve Bank. Now, it's debatable whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It may actually be a good thing. But that's not acceptable at the level of sovereignty. What we are recommending, and what I have been recommending for the last 9 years, is that we do not have to join the Rand monetary area. And the governor and the Reserve Bank have incorrectly been stating that we have to do that. And I have repeatedly been correcting them. We don't have to do that. All we have to do is come to an informal agreement with, well, it's official but informal, with the South African Reserve Bank. That's it. They have to remove exchange control on the border. That's all. So that if you have some Rand in your pocket, you can come across from this side to that side and that side to this side. And it can be done, there's a free flow of currency on the two sides. So it is true that if you want to formally join the Rand monetary area, you need your own currency. But that is something down the road. First, let's go in the direction of informally having the Rand as our currency. Then maybe 1 or 2 years down the road, we can then introduce a little bit of our own national currency and that can trade against the rand, and that's the direction in which you can gradually move. Maybe 5-7 years down the road, then you can have your own national currency as well. So that's what is being recommended. It is completely incorrect, any statement from the Reserve Bank which states that you have to join the rand monetary area to use the rand. That is absolutely not true. You go back to 2009, we use the rand without anybody's permission, and that's what I'm recommending today, but we do it a little more formally. We must talk to our brothers. We can't just start doing it like that. We need some support from them. So that's the randization I'm talking about. In terms of, Linda, your question, that's a very dangerous one. But nevertheless, you obviously were not listening to ZBC yesterday and Capital Talk FM, because I spoke precisely on that for more than an hour. 242% is just grossly incorrect. And I have great respect for Professor Hankey. He's the man who measured our hyperinflation back in 2007 and 2008 and gave us some accurate statistics. But his 242% is based, I won't go into technicalities, it's based on the price of one share which trades on the Zimbabwe stock market. It's called the Old Mutual Company. So this Old Mutual Company, just to explain to you, trades on the Zimbabwe stock market. It also trades on the London stock market. So the idea is that supposing just to give you an example, on the London stock market, let's say an Old Mutual share is $1. Yeah, it should also be $1 here because it's a tradable share. But supposing it is $3 here and $1 there. So Professor Hankey says that you divide the $3 is 300% of $1. So the inflation rate is 300%. He's using only the value of the Old Mutual share to calculate the inflation rate in Zimbabwe. So that's not how inflation is calculated. Inflation is calculated, as you know, as all of us know, as the difference between the price of a good yesterday and today. So if cooking oil last week was $3.39 and today is $3.35, that's an increase of about 12%. Okay? That is the correct way that you measure it. So in Zimbabwe, we've got one index which is calculated by Zimstat. That's under the Ministry of Finance. So the Zimstat has something called a consumer price index. And that consumer price index has only got basic commodities. So it's got things like mealie meal, cooking oil, maybe the combi fares, school fees, milk, fuel. So it has about 8 or 10 items like that. Now in those items, the prices have not gone up so much. So if you put them together, Zimstat will come out with a figure saying that inflation during September was maybe 5% or 7%. But that's not also a good reflection. So at one end we have Professor Hankey, the other end we have Zimstat, which you said. If you want to look at inflation across the economy, you've got to look at a much broader range of products which many of us trade in. You also have to look at, say, car tires or batteries, things which are in common use. So if you take a broader group of commodities ranging from mealie meal to cooking oil to tires, fuel, etc., etc., my assessment is that currently our rate of inflation is probably in the region of around 20%. That's my assessment. But I can't justify it. I have not made any calculation, and I'm not going to do it. But anyone who knows somebody who's a lecturer in the University of Zimbabwe, you can ask them to do a quick calculation. It will only take maybe a couple of hours. You take the prices of maybe about 15, 20 important commodities, what it was, let's say, last month, compared today, and you calculate the difference, and that will give you the inflation rate. So my suspicion is it's about 20 or 25%. But I can't justify that. The calculation can be done. And the main reason for this happening is because, as I mentioned in my presentation, we have a shortage of foreign exchange, and so there's a premium on foreign exchange. So somebody, let's say a cooking oil manufacturer, they're having to pay a premium of maybe 30% to import some of their raw materials. So some of that 30% is being passed on in terms of the increase in the price of cooking oil. In an item which is purely imported, then the inflation can be even more. Maybe tires might be 40%, 50%. But when you average it out, my suspicion is that inflation currently is in the range of 20-25%. And I don't think that it will get much worse than this, unless, of course, as my fellow presenter Naomi said, there's political expediency, political uncertainty as we go towards the elections. If tomorrow the Ministry of Finance spends $2 billion on I don't know what, well, inflation may go very high. We have no control. But if they continue in the manner that the government continues its policies in the way that they are right now, I don't expect it to go much higher than the 20-25% we are currently facing. Okay, so that's the answer to your question. And finally, I think the last question is for Naomi, but I think I'll just say one thing. You know, we, under the ease of doing business, we have had many, many committees dealing with manufacturing sector, mining sector. I was also involved in the committee on exports. And let me tell you, we had great difficulty finding people in our export committee who represented the interests of the informal sector. We really had to scratch around to say, well, why can't we find somebody who is trading in the informal sector who can come and tell us what their problems is? And it was a serious problem. So I think that it's not for them to pay for you. These committees are set up by government, they're platforms. You also have to plug into what is happening. So just to give you one piece of advice, there are so many associations which are recognized associations in Zimbabwe. We have CZI, we have ZNCC, which has got a women's wing. We have the Small and Medium Enterprises Association, SMEAS. We have FOFU now, we have the Federation of Farmers Unions. The farmers unions have formed a federation. And there are so many other associations which do different things. So these associations automatically get invitations to come and sit on government committees. In any committee that I have sat on in the last 2 to 3 years, you always have ZNCC, SMEAS, someone from Farmers Federation, etc., etc., etc. So my recommendation to you, and I'm sure Naomi will have more to add, is that these are the places where you have to plug in more actively, so that you make sure that, you know, what your agenda is, your voice can be heard. I'm not suggesting that you don't do it directly, but these people already get invited. So your voice within these organizations needs to be strengthened. That's what I would recommend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ashok. I'll be very brief because of time. Some of the entry points have been said. Okay. I also want to draw one issue, maybe one or two issues, from what Professor Ashok has said. Back to the informal economy. We cannot run away from it. This is who we are, isn't it? This is what we are. This is who we are. So if there is going to be any concrete strategy moving forward, it cannot sideline the issue of informal economy in Zimbabwe. And I'm glad that, yes, there is wide acceptance, as you have said, that the informal economy is vital for economic growth. But I think for me, what is more important beyond just acceptance is the change of the regulations that we have, the laws that we have. Because as long as there's just acceptance, we have a minister coming on TV to say we are accepting the informal economy, and yet the laws have not changed. They are still criminalizing the informal economy, giving power to the municipality to remove the informal economy. Then that's a disjointed action or a process. So for me, beyond just acceptance, we want to see the legalization process happening, because that's the tool now that we can use as women to say, but mutemo unoti this, we have a legal basis for our voices. So I understand that the bylaws of 19 Chapter are still there. They have to be changed. That's also one of the entry points as women who are in the informal economy, working together with women, women coalition. Yes, thank you. And the role of the media, I'm happy that we have got our sisters from the media houses, right? And the media plays a very important role in terms of flagging out women's issues. And I'm imploring on them to even do more than what they are doing currently in terms of flagging out women's issues, challenges, and what we need to see happening on the ground. Not only that, but also the media. He was saying he was on Capital Talk Radio. Yes. How many of us, me for sure, I did not, and I gave myself homework to say I need to improve myself in terms of even knowledge generation and information generation, right? We need to be more visible in those kind of media platforms. Nowadays, I'm happy we have more than the more than what we may need in terms of the media houses. We have got that space. That is an entry point for us to go there and talk about our issues and policy direction and strategies. Thank you very much.
Taking some concrete action.
For these and other stories, visit our website www.263chat.com. Follow us on Twitter @263chat and like our Facebook page 263chat.